When I went searching for adventure in East Timor, I found something far more terrifying. There are some things in this world we just shouldn't disturb, let alone see. And I did both. And just when I thought it was all in my head, a witch doctor proved me wrong. Hey guys, welcome to Bent Planet, where I tell you true stories of humans in abnormal predicaments, tales that will twist your mind. And this story is no exception. All right, get comfortable. Are you ready to hear a story? So this was back in the early 2000s, and I was doing a lot of exploring around Indonesia at that time. I loved Bali, I was going to Bali a lot, and from there I would explore all around Indonesia. And I was traveling with my cousin for a whole bunch of months. We ended up deciding to go to East Timor, which is the most eastern point of Indonesia and a place that was once Indonesia, and they fought for their independence for a bunch of years and rightfully got their independence back. So my cousin and I decided to go there for an adventure. A good friend of his, an ex-military guy, was running security detail for the president of East Timor at the time. And it was still pretty chaotic there when we went there. There was still a lot of different factions fighting against each other and gang warfare and all sorts of stuff, fighting for little bits of power in the area. But once we were there and once we met up with my cousin's mate, he was like, let's get out of this main area and I'm gonna take you guys camping to this incredibly beautiful spot, like one of the most beautiful places you'll ever see to camp in. And we were, like, my cousin and I are both avid campers. We grew up in the Blue Mountains, west of Sydney. We were camping all the time growing up, so we loved the idea of camping. So we get in this four-wheel drive, and it was myself, my cousin's girlfriend, and then his mate and his girlfriend. So there's five of us, and we get in this four-wheel drive, and we drive out as far east as you can go in East Timor. So like the most eastern point of that whole archipelago of Indonesia and then East Timor. And you know, it was a rough trail back then. It was really hard to get to. We had a flat tire at one point, and there was all sorts of difficulties getting there. But eventually, you know, this massive, big, crazy rugged trail, we got to this spot where we could get out of the car and then walk down and climb down this sort of cliff embankment rock face onto this beautiful area that stretched out against, like it was the coastline of just absolutely stunning, pristine, white sandy beaches with just that classic crystal clear tropical water. It was so beautiful, such a beautiful spot. And like just back off the sand of the beach were all these tamarind trees, and tamarind trees grow to be huge trees. And because they spread out so far, as they go up, their branches spread out quite low, they start spreading out. They create these huge canopies, like beautiful areas of shade with lots of space between them. So you can just sort of hang out. And like the ground's littered with tamarind. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's like little seed pods where you pull the seed pods open and you chew on this like jelly, thick jelly kind of substance. And it tastes exactly like remember those Coke bottles, the sweet and sour Coke bottles? Yeah, it tastes like that. Anyway, you can snack on those, and incredible spot to camp. And so, you know, we found this spot, we found some betel nut and tried betel nut, and gets to night time, we've got this beautiful big campfire, stars, the whole bit. And eventually everyone decides to start heading off to sleep. And we had these tents that were more like mosquito nets. So they're like, you know, the classic dome-shaped tent, but they're designed for dry weather, so you don't have to worry about rain at all. It's just a mosquito net, and the beauty of that is you can lie back in this tent and look at the stars or look around you and see out really easily. As long as it doesn't rain, you're sweet and you're protected from the mosquitoes and bugs and shit, right? So anyway, we take our tents and we go to set them up, and I thought, well, these guys are two couples, I'll let them do their thing and I might push off a bit. It's already dark, so I take my tent and push through the shrubbery and find a area where I can see that enough to put out this tent, and I set it up, and then I lie down in there and get ready to go to sleep. Now, a bit of a backstory. I grew up with a condition that, depending on which train of thought you're in, you could call it two different things. One train of thought is that it's called night terrors and sleep paralysis, and another train of thought is that you are being visited by spirits or attacked by them. And so I suffered greatly from this most of my life, especially through my childhood years and into my teens. My mother believed I was being spiritually attacked often, so therefore that's what I believed, right? Because I was a kid and I was growing up, so that's what I believed what was happening. And at this point, like in the early 2000s, as an adult, I still had it happen quite often, where I would basically go into sleep paralysis, my eyes could still see, and I'd look around the room and I'd see demons or spirits or whatever come in, and then often I'd feel like I was being attacked, like they were sitting on my chest and choking me and covering my mouth, and all sorts of horrific experiences. Like the most terrifying shit I've ever experienced in my life is the feeling of being in the middle of one of those attacks. So anyway, cut forward to this moment, and there I am. I've set up my tent, I'm lying down in it, bright moonlight so I could sort of see through the trees, and an incredible, beautiful spot, beautiful location. But then I felt this tingling in my body and this familiar feeling that, oh shit, I'm about to go into sleep paralysis again. And it was just this bizarre thing that would happen to me. And sure enough, I feel my body, I'm lying on my side, I felt my body just go limp. And then I used to get this like weird white noise in my ears, like almost like I was hearing another dimension or something. And so my body's paralyzed and I'm looking out through the trees, through the shrubs and the trees in this bizarre remote location. While I'm lying there, I'm terrified because I know I'm about to see something, because I would always end up seeing something at this point. And sure enough, through the shrubbery and the trees, in the distance, I see this massive wolf start weaving through the trees, and it's like looking up at me. And I'm freaking out because I know there are no wolves in East Timor. So I know that whatever this is, it's spiritual or it's a hallucination or whatever it is. The thing is, like, when you're in the moment, it doesn't, like, any kind of reasoning is gone. You're just terrified of what's happening, and you can't move, so it's freaky as. Anyway, I watched this wolf for a while, sort of pacing between the trees and sort of glancing up at me, and then it wanders off, and then all of a sudden this guy runs from out of the trees, and it's this short man with long, thick, dreadlocky hair. He's really old, like mottled skin, lots of wrinkles, and he's got real yellow, leathery skin all over his body, like this real, as if he's just this old, hardened, troll kind of looking dude. And he's just wearing loincloths and raggy clothes, and he comes charging through the bush and through the woods and stops just a couple of meters in front of me outside the tent, and I'm just like this, just terrified. And then he's looking at me and he just starts screaming, "It shouldn't be here," like this, really angry that I was there. And I'm just watching him, just freaking out, not knowing what the hell's going to happen next, or whether he's going to attack me or what's going on. And these experiences, like, many times turned into a physical feeling, being attacked. As I said, like things jumping on me, grabbing my throat, covering my mouth, putting their hands deep into my chest, and like it's almost like having your soul tickled. It's a weird description, but this horrendous feeling like something's getting its claws into your soul. So there's this absolute fear that that's going to happen and it's going to escalate to that level. Anyway, I'm lying there terrified, paralyzed, and eventually he turns around and just walks off into the bushes. And bang, I get my movement back. I come back into my body, like control of my body, and I just jump up and I sit up in the tent, just freaking out, going, fuck! And I'm like terrified, so I just rip the zipper open, jump out, and just charge through the bushes back to where the campfire was. And I'm sitting in front of the campfire. Didn't want to wake up the guys because, they're asleep, and like felt very weird about these situations. So I'm sitting there for a while, just like terrified, and I kept looking back into the bushes, still really full of adrenaline and shaking at what had just happened. And then I was so scared of whatever was in those bushes that I just went, fuck it, and I ran out into the water. I was just wearing my board shorts. Ran out into the water and swam out into the water about 40 or 50 meters. And this is quite late at this point into the night. So I just swam out there and just I was just treading water until the light filled the sky, or the light started to fill the sky, and I'm out there, and as I must have been out there for an hour or more, and eventually like the light started filling the sky, and I look up back at the campfire and I see my cousin get out of his tent and come and start stoking the fire. So I swim back in, and he's like, "What the hell's going on? Like, what are you up so early for?" And then he saw the look on my face, and because we'd traveled a lot together, he had seen me go through some weird shit with my night stuff. So he was like, "Oh, you've had some weird shit happen again, haven't you?" And I was like, so I tell him everything that had happened, and he's like, "Okay, mate, come here." And then he, as it gets more light, he said, "Hey, look, let's go pack up your tent. I'll come with you." And so we both walk and find where my tent was, and then he walks around the back of the tent and just goes, "Dude, did you see this when you were setting up your tent?" And I sort of look up and go, "What the hell?" Right behind the tent, like not far from it, is this massive pyramid, like really tall pyramid made out of rocks. So it's just this like clearly man-made stacked rock pyramid that went right up in the air. It was quite tall. And then hanging from a branch on a tree above the pyramid, hanging perfectly above the point of the pyramid, was this massive goat skull. Fuck knows what that meant, but all I took it to mean was, you should not be here. So like, and my cousin was like, "Yeah, no, we shouldn't be here." So we just quickly packed up the tent and hoiked it back to where the other guys were. And anyway, so flash forward, we ended up getting the hell out of that spot. And don't get me wrong, that whole area was one of the most beautiful camping places I've ever been to in my life, bar that freaky experience. So anyway, a lot more happened in East Timor, but I'll flash forward to being back in Bali sometime weeks later. And I'm still having lots of these night terrors or spiritual experiences or whatever you want to call them. And I meet this girl, and I think we were sitting on the beach or something chatting, and we got into a discussion about spiritual stuff. And you know, Indonesians are really open to the spiritual world, like far more than people in the West, and their descriptions of these kinds of events are far more weighted towards spiritual rather than scientifically, you know, just hallucinations or whatever. So anyway, I'm talking to this woman, and I didn't tell her about that particular East Timor experience. I just told her that I had weird shit happen at night, and then she tells me that she has the same stuff happen, and we're, you know, back and forth like, "Oh, do you see things, and do they attack you?" And we're going through this discussion, but I hadn't told her about East Timor. And then she says, "Actually, I know a paranormal," and a paranormal is another word for, I guess, a witch doctor or someone that deals with the spiritual realm in Indonesia. And she said, "I know a paranormal, and I think you should visit him, and he might be able to help you like understand why it's happening to you and talk through it and all this kind of stuff." So I'm always intrigued by this stuff. Like, give me any avenue to run down, and I'll run full speed down it, because I want to know what the hell's going on. And I'm just intrigued by what different cultures and different people think of these things, and how they personally diagnose situations, and what their, you know, whole cultural lineage believes on these matters. And it's fascinating stuff. So I've seen a lot of different people throughout Asia regarding spiritual stuff, and it's always a fascinating insight into their experiences and their beliefs. Anyway, so I get lined up to meet this guy. She takes me and she introduces me to him, and then she leaves. So I start having this session with him. He's talking about lots of different things, and he's sort of he had like all these rocks and different things he was sort of chanting over and stuff. And after a while, he's looking at me, and he starts asking me these questions like, "Have you been somewhere really remote lately? Within the last few weeks?" And I was like, "Yeah, pretty ambiguous question, right?" So I was like, "Yeah," because I'm also quite skeptical. As much as I have some weird experiences, I'm also very skeptical of like the legitimacy of many people's claims, because it's very easy to, anyway, I won't go into that. But I was like, "Yeah, that's a very open question, but yeah, I've been to some remote places." And then he started being more specific, like, did you go camping in a remote area where it's hard to get to? And I'm like, yeah. And then he's like, was it in a place where something strange happened? Did you experience anything strange? And did you have a feeling you shouldn't be there? And I'm like, well, now that you mention it, I'm like, yeah. And then he says, did you see something there that scared you? And I'm like, yes. He said, was it a short man about this high? And just starts describing this dude that I saw. Describing the trolley, yellow, leathery skinned, matted hair, everything. He just describes him exactly how I saw him. And I'm like, yeah. And then he just like looks next to me and looks down and up and just looks back at me and goes, Masih ada. And Masih ada in Indonesian means still here. He basically just tells me that the guy is still here, right next to me. And I just get shivers up and down my body and just go, okay, can you tell him to leave? And I'm like, why? And he says, well, you disturbed him and he clung to you, and he's been following you everywhere you've gone. And I'm just like, can we do something to tell him to leave and that he doesn't need to follow me anymore? And he's like, yeah, we can. So he does this whole ceremony then and basically asks the guy, like, I had to apologize for disturbing him and go through this whole process, but we went through this whole process and eventually he said that the spirit left and that I was no longer being trailed by this freaky dude. So that was wild. And that's when I really felt like that's another tip towards legitimacy of spirituality rather than just hallucinations, right? So the final cap to that was, I actually at the time was reading a book called The Secret Life of Plants, which is a pretty fascinating book about our symbiotic nature, our symbiotic relationship with nature on Earth, and the relationship that plants have with each other, let alone with all other living things. And it was a book with a green cover, and it was in my bag, which my bag had a flap that went all the way over and shut, and so the bag was completely closed the entire time that I was seeing this guy. Never opened the bag. When I got up and left, as I was getting on my motorbike, he looks at me and he says, hey, by the way, that book's going to be really good for you. And I was like, which book? And he goes, the book in your bag, the one with the green cover. And I was just like, okay, yep, you're pretty onto it. Anyway, that is my story of a bizarre spiritual experience I had in East Timor. Freaky as it was. By the way, East Timor is an amazing place, beautiful. Don't be put off going there or learning more about its beauty because of this story. It's a fascinating, beautiful place with an incredible, brutal but rich history, and the people there are amazing. Met incredible people there, so big up to the people of East Timor. All right, guys. I'd love to hear your comments if you've ever experienced anything like that, if you experience sleep paralysis, night terrors, whether your belief leans more into spirituality or science. When it comes to this stuff, I believe the two can coexist and probably do. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. So please write in the comments and let's open the discussion. In the meantime, stay safe out there, and as always, stay bent.